Welcome everyone to our webinar today. Super excited. I'm gonna quickly pause the music and we can kick things off. Okay. Loving the jam. Sorry, Ivan. We just stopped it because we're getting started, but we'll send around the song name after by Bad Bunny. But with that, welcome everyone to Epoch's Employee Experience webinar featuring today PJ from Yelp. So I'll kick things off with high-level intros, have PJ intro herself, and then we'll dive into our conversation. But to kick things off, thank you again for joining us. I'm Jade, one of the co-founders of Epoch. We host these webinars to gather people to share knowledge, as we know employee experience, workplace experience, and overall company culture is evolving so fast with hybrid and remote first work. So really why we host these is so that people can just share learnings and ask questions. So with that said, let's get started. So to warm up the chat, because we do encourage everyone to ask questions along the way. But to kick things off, maybe everyone, if you want to drop into the chat how you're feeling today as an emoji, that could be super fun. And let me know if you can't write in the chat, but I think people can. But anyways, yes, put in any emoji you want. But with that said, today what we'll be hearing from PJ are PJ's thoughts on employee experience, remote first work, or some people call it hybrid workplace, ERGs, and much, much more. And high level on PJ, I've known PJ for I think more than 2 years now. And it's been just incredible hearing how PJ approaches employee experience and remote first work at Yelp. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to PJ to introduce herself, and then we'll dive into it.
Thank you so much, Jade. I am so happy to be here and talking about all of our favorite things. Every time that we get into a meeting, we're like, it's not enough time. So I'm glad that we have more time today. Hi, everyone. I am PJ Calzadilla Ortiz. My pronouns are she, they. I work at Yelp, as you already heard, born and raised in Puerto Rico, currently based in Chicago. And I am incredibly passionate about the experience that employees have wherever they work, making sure that it's inclusive, equitable, and really provides a lot of opportunities for folks to thrive. So I'm excited to have the conversation today.
Amazing. Thank you so much, PJ. And thank you everyone for joining us today. But yeah, to kick things off, PJ, what drew you into the space of employee experience and culture, and why is it important to you?
Yeah. So get a little personal here. When I first joined Yelp in 2015, I was in a different department. I was in sales, and I came in with a very clear idea of what I thought I needed to be and who I thought I needed to show up as in order to succeed. And I quickly found out through Yelp's culture and through the opportunities and things like employer resource groups, which I know we're going to get into, that I could really be my authentic self and still succeed. And in getting involved in a number of different employee resource groups and programming across the specific office that I was in Arizona. And just meeting people and sharing those stories, it showed me, hey, you are passionate about why people want to work here and what makes them happy to work here. And for a really long time, I didn't know what that would amount to, right? A lot of career paths are not linear, and a lot of you don't necessarily have everything figured out, but you know what drives you and what you're passionate about. And fast forward to 2018, I was able to join the Yelp's culture team. So Yelp's culture team oversees, I say more of like an umbrella. We oversee engagement, employee engagement, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, internal communications, and social impact. So really, we get to touch a lot of parts of the business on equity and inclusive behaviors that not only come from things like employee resource groups, but also from leadership. So having been a part of a lot of initiatives and programming around that definitely validated that initial passion that I had. And it just continues to grow for me, for sure.
That's awesome. And for you, what does employee experience mean, or even for Yelp, the philosophy, the approach to it?
Yeah. So to me, employee experience is really this holistic approach to a person's journey within the workplace, right? Like it's more than a feeling, it's more than a feel-good theory. It's all these pieces that really come together to create value for today's employee and today's worker to not only want to stay where they're at, but to thrive where they're at, right? We want to make sure that the entire human is addressed, and that involves the types of events that we host, the guests that we bring to speak, the conversations that we're having within our employees and employee resource groups, the trainings that we build in partnership with teams across the company, the benefits that we offer. Really, we know that not every single thing is going to appeal to every single person, right? But you want to make sure that when you look at everything from that 30,000, foot view, you're meeting the needs of all the communities that you want to serve, including your employees and the communities that want to be seen and heard. So that's how we look at that.
That is incredible. And I guess when you're like strategizing culture and like considering all these new programs and internal events, like what are the considerations that are top of mind for yourself, for your team?
Yeah. So to give a little bit more context on my role, on top of like co-managing all of the employee resource groups, I do have a hand in all the events that come out of the culture team. So the way that we position this is that ERGs have their own mission and their own programming, and then there's all these other events and opportunities that come out of the culture team as the responsibility of that team. So we have like a Thursday slot, for example, every week where there's a company-wide event happening. And the way that we decide these is really has a number of different elements to it. It could be considering identity and value-based initiatives, and that's what we call Black History Month, API Heritage Month, Transgender Visibility, Pride, Juneteenth, Latinx Heritage Month, etc. We all know if you're in this space, there's something going on every month. So that's definitely a piece of it. Like, what can we be doing to amplify the voices in those communities and in those celebrations? But we also need to take into account what's happening in the world, right? Like, what are these current events that are affecting the world? Yes, and very much are still affecting our employees. So really having a pulse on what folks need and what folks want to have a space to discuss, a check-in, right? Like within members that share identities or share lived experiences. And also take into account that we're lifting the right voices and offering an array of opportunity for employees to learn and engage with one another in different ways. Some things may be more interactive than others. Other things you need to show up and listen, right? Because there's a lot of nuance depending on the department and the role that you're in. How much time you have to dedicate to an event or an opportunity has to be taken into account. Time zones, of course, I know is a really, really hot topic in the remote and the hybrid world. So, not every single one is going to be perfect, but you want to really look back and say, okay, here's everything that we offered that applies to the majority, if not everybody.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know that is something a lot of people are thinking about, like how do we create an equitable culture, workplace, but it's hard because it's not always applicable to everyone. And I think that ties nicely, PJ, too. I know you mentioned ERGs are like a huge way that Yelp is able to engage with employees and allow for voices to be heard. So I guess like what are ERGs to Yelp and to yourself?
Yeah. They're near and dear to my heart, having been one of the first things I ever did in the company. So ERGs is what we call them, Yelp Employee Resource Group. So if you hear me say that, now you know what I'm referring to. Listen, they're a very crucial element to creating community and a sense of belonging for a lot of different types of lived experiences within our organization. However, we do not see them as responsible for solving systemic issues within the organization, if that makes sense, right? Like, at Yelp, being an ERG leader is still a volunteer position. And while we have a bunch of resources that I'm sure we're going to be speaking about in terms of like what we've invested in them, how we support them, how we empower them, it is not their responsibility to fix these systemic issues that happen in our society, in all industries, and in all companies. So that is something that is also being tackled by leadership and diversity task forces, by department. Our chief diversity officer works on those, right? Like leaders are being in charge and carrying that torch of those initiatives to make sure that they're being carried out in an equitable way. So if there's anything that I would say there, is just don't expect your ERGs to be the sole solve for community building issues in your organization. And why they're important to me was that the next question?
Yes.
I mean, on a personal note, it was the first time I ever even thought possible that who I am as I am could be successful, and could be accepted. Like being a part of a group like that is a very large part of the reason why I'm still at Yelp 7 years later. They uplift the needs of specific communities. They speak to different experiences and intersectional experiences that you're going to hear me say a lot. They help educate the greater population of the organization in many different ways. And they help us celebrate. They help us really take note of the joy as well, because there's a lot of education in this work. And that can often get heavy and tiring and okay, we have so much to get done, but ERGs are also here to say, hey, we want to sit in that joy for a little bit. We were already talking about 2023 planning and Black History Month, and I was talking to my leads for our Black ERG, and they're like, let's talk about Black excellence. Let's talk about Black joy, right? Yes, we have all these other topics that we want to continue talking about, but really ERGs help you form a direction that's authentic to the community that you're speaking to. So yes, I get very passionate about ERG.
I love that so much, because so many people right now are either considering starting up ERGs within their organizations or thinking of ways how do we engage them further, especially as we are staying remote first. It's the best way, to your point, to allow people to feel seen and connected within their company on a deeper way. So I guess for you all, how do you ensure they're successful?
Yeah. So I'm going to back up a little bit, because this year we decided to do a reset. So we, starting in the summer, we went on this intake journey of, let's see what's going on with all of our ERGs. And we did focus groups. We had interviews with other companies that are really invested in their ERGs as well. We did a lot of research and reports that have been ran on the business case of ERGs and the operations and structures of ERGs, and really doing a lot of due diligence to see and prioritize what do our ERGs, based on the history that they've had till today, really need to continue a momentum or build a momentum, or just make sure that they feel rewarded in meeting the mission that they set when the group started. So out of all of that came a bunch of new things for 2023, which I'm extremely excited about, a new budget, more guidance, right? And by guidance, I mean some folks were like, hey, I jumped on this leadership role and I don't even know what you expect of me, right? So it's writing all those things down, having processes down, having a lot of clarity and transparency in how our team helps ERGs feel supported, and what ERG leaders can actually take the initiative and do. Processes for promotional communications and newsletters and things like that have changed a little bit internally. But ultimately is making it really clear that at Yelp, being an ERG lead is still a volunteer position. But one of the ways that we navigate that is the resources that we give them, and also how we help them make, not to be cheesy here, but their dreams come true, right? If you have an employee who has, to prioritize their job, they all do, right? But they have this passion to build this community or build this specific initiative or this event. There we come in, they tell us, right? They tell me, they tell my colleague, Oli, highly. And we get our heads together and say, okay, what do you need for this in terms of promotion? How far in advance? Is it company wide? Is it group specific? Do we put it on the calendar? What is the description going to look like? What is it going to sound like? Is there an element like a book raffle if they're inviting an author in, right? Or is there like some food vouchers, right? So we try to really help them give shape to this, to make sure that they know that they don't have to do it all alone. So that's been something that's been keeps giving back. Now going into 23, where we've been remote first for 2.5 years. What we're really seeing with this new budget and this new guidelines and resources is that there's a lot more like, okay, like I'm ready to take this on, and like really empowering them to see the initiative that they can take. Like, yes, we'll definitely still help with logistics, but there came a point with that when then there was a little bit of like lack of clarity and like, okay, what does the culture team do versus what do I do as a leader? So what we're doing to mitigate that is a comms strategy, basically outlining expectations and prerequisites to be in a steering committee or a co-chair position. What do you get out of that, right? What are the resources that you have at hand, and really blasting that out company-wide. I use this quarter to meet with every single leadership group for all of our groups, and they're all in agreement that we want a fresh talent pipeline. And oftentimes what happens is that people don't know, oh, I saw that group and it's really cool, but I don't know how to join. Lower that barrier to entry. Talk to your comms team or your team, right? And like really have a say in like, how do we make this less scary for folks, right? If these resources are in place and we are invested in these succeeding as a company, what like that next step is letting folks know that, and letting and really drawing it out and panning it out for them so they can know that it's not this like scary thing that, you know, is going to take everything off of their plate and they're going to have to focus on this or they're going to fail. And another point that I want to make on that is that all groups look different, right? Like while we have guidelines, we understand that some groups are for support. Some groups are for visibility. Some groups are like prioritize professional development. Some groups want to really like that social aspect and lean into that, and community, right? And we want to allow those groups to fluctuate in that way and have the space that they need and the reason why they wanted to create it in the first place. So that was a lot, but
That's incredibly helpful, especially hearing how, like, in terms of even you all having that challenge of how do people find out about these ERGs or like ERGs in Yelp's place. Like, I know you mentioned that it's really interacting with the comms team and making sure it's out there and it's like amplified, but does that look like a newsletter, like messages, like emails? What has been effective, or like what are y'all planning on doing more of in 2023?
Yeah, so this comes back to the initial point of like how our team is structured. So because we oversee internal comms,
Nice.
we have a few comms specialists on our team that they divvy up responsibilities, but I basically, you know, create the content alongside them. And we have the entire company internal comms calendar and we strategize like where to place that.
Cool.
So for example, the first time it came out, just again, more context. So we have 2 newsletters that go out every month. The first week of the month, you have the events newsletter that really details all the events that are going on that month. And then the third week, you have what we call the Belonging at Yelp newsletter, which is celebrations more in depth, employee spotlights, collaborations that we're having with other parts of the teams, with other teams of the company, things like that. And in the events one in November, we kind of put it at the bottom, right? We started like sprinkling it in. We're like, hey, you know, if you like these events, if you like the events in 2022, like read this document and see how to get involved. And the document was a very detailed, just note of like what prerequisites we need and what you can expect to be a group, and then who to contact basically. And then we're also trying to prioritize a couple of groups that haven't had leadership for a while, right? But ultimately everyone's welcome to join whatever group they like. So we're doing that, and that was like starting it. And then now our lengthier newsletter that goes out company-wide in December is going to be a ERG recap of 2022. So really highlighting cross-functional and cross-collaborative events, because we're really, as a company, passionate and trying to expand and make others fluent in the intersectionality. So we really start with our ERGs like that, right? Our Black and Latinx ERG had a conversation with colorism in the Latin community, right? Our color coded and YAPI group had a conversation on Asian and Black solidarity. So really things like that we want to continue to see more of. So we're going to be highlighting them. And then also explaining to folks, hey, here's how you join. And if you're interested in either leading an event or initiative, getting your feet wet, right? Here's who you contact and here's the process and things like that. So
That's awesome.
That's already starting this month. And then next year in January, we'll have more standalone communications about that.
That's incredible.
Because you can never have too many emails.
What people need to know, it's always that. It's like always such a shame when people are like, I didn't know that was happening. Like, how do I find out? And it's like, okay, this is how. But it's incredible to hear, just really lowering the barriers for learning about it, starting something.
Yeah. And this year we started also a quarterly ERG meet and greet, where we would take new hires in that last quarter that came into the company, regardless of department. And then we would have a few ERG leaders come and talk about their experience from different groups. So that was another way to get in front and say hey, these groups have humans behind them. And here's the type of programming that you can expect.
That's incredible. It's almost like in college when they have the club fair. Very important.
Very similar.
And with that, I would love to kind of talk about the Yelp Summit too. I know you talked about having a summit to re-engage and empower ERGs. So yeah, could you share a little bit about what that is and the outcomes and why that was such an awesome thing you all did?
Yeah. So I love the summit. I was very scared the first time we did it. We did it for the first time last year. And it kind of sparked of an idea because around July and August, initiative and celebration wise, it tends to be a little quieter than the rest of the year. Between Pride and Latinx month. But we had also heard from our ERG leaders, hey, I want to know who else is an ERG leader. Hey, I want to collaborate and really have more of those opportunities. So the summit really came about to provide that opportunity, to provide a space for folks to say hey, I'm passionate about this. I want to work on this. Would your group be interested in working with mine? So the first year was 3 sessions. One was a co-working session where we mixed group leaders on purpose so they could work on a campaign together and make it intersectional and really think about all the angles that go into it. Because we want a very big thing that I'm passionate about is first of all, Black History Month should not just be celebrated in February, and same for all the campaigns, right? And similarly, there are so many intersecting identities within the Black community, and the same applies to all of them. So really getting folks to think about what that could look like, so more and more folks feel seen and known. So we also had a panel, which this happened this year too. We had a panel with ERG leaders from other companies. And that by far, the second year in a row has been the most popular one. This year we had GitHub, Glassdoor, Meta, and Gap. And it was just such a fruitful conversation. Everybody was like, can it last longer? Because really what comes out of this is not only do you learn, and help share what also, because all of our companies function differently and things like that, but you're also not alone. The majority, if not all, I dare to say, of people that lead ERGs is pure passion for their community and representation. And when you meet somebody else that aligns with you on that, it's really powerful. So getting folks from that, it started a whole document of like, okay, like which companies do we know and how can we get together and talk more about these things. And so that was really, really powerful. And then it ended with like a positivity workshop that we did with an external vendor. And we also announced like the resources coming in 2023. So that was really exciting for folks. It also created like a chat room for all the ERG leaders that they previously didn't have. You know, we used to have these, but we're gonna have more quarterly meetings with all the ERG leaders because each group has their steering committee meetings and their own cadence. But we've seen a lot of positivity come out and progress come out of bringing all the ERG leaders together at least once a quarter.
That is awesome. And with that, PJ, shifting gears a bit, I know we have like 15 more minutes. Like we probably will go a bit over. Just warning everyone, I love everything PJ has to share, and I think you all will too. But let's talk a little bit about location-based communities. So I think that ties nicely to like ERGs or like ERGs, but it's interesting how Yelp approaches this. So I guess maybe to kick things off, PJ, could you share with everyone like what are location-based communities and like why Yelp has these?
Yeah. First of all, I wish we had a catchier name.
Mm.
We're working on that.
Location-based. I know, like
We are working on that. Yeah, no, so this actually originated from a company-wide distributed work survey that our employees took. And it had an overwhelmingly result of we prefer remote first. Like we are confident that our employees like the direction that the company's going in and want to keep it that way, right? But with that also came, okay, but I do want to know who is in my area, if anybody at all. So, which is completely natural. So our team kind of did a little this is one of the results that our team was then kind of like in charge of moving forward with and finding some solutions. And we noticed, like we looked at this map where we could see like just like a heat map, nothing like too exact, but where everybody lived pre-pandemic, which were where we had our offices, and now where everybody lives, which is we have someone in every state.
Wow.
So which is awesome, right? It's open doors for so many people to really live and do things that they truly want and identify with. So with that, we thought about creating the location-based communities, and we started with the top 25 metros. And with the threshold for that is if there was 20 or more employees in that area. We're not saying you can't create like a group if it's less than that. It's just that that's what we facilitated. So it is a Google space because we unfortunately don't have Slack company-wide, you know this. But yeah, it's been really exciting to see. I mean, I'm in the Chicago one and it's blown up. They're like having meetups and little flyers, and they like vote on places to go. And it's been really cool to see it already get such much positivity out. So I can't wait to see what it'll do in 2023 because that came out this quarter.
And how do you all empower and encourage these communities to connect and do things together? Is it similar to how you all approach ERGs or?
So not really yet. Like we haven't really thought out of necessarily like roles for folks or anything like that, just because it is very much like, okay, you asked for a way to how to connect with folks or to at least know where they are. And now we like are giving you that, but there are some just things that we have to work through internally to make sure that we're not like making anybody feel like they're missing out if they don't attend to something, or you know that they don't feel like forced to attend something. So there's like that equity piece that is delicate and you have to work through. So right now it's been really self-powered. There was another story. Yeah, very grassroots. There was another one, I think in Florida when Hurricane Ian happened, like they were able to like check in on each other, you know, because they were in that area. And that stuff is very powerful. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I have similar questions in terms of like, how can we continue their momentum and create momentums for those who don't have it, and then the new year. But I'm excited that we heard our employees and we were able to do something about it.
For sure. It sounds like you all mobilized fast, and having that heat map, allowing, like, creating space for people to even just find each other, to your point. And with that, PJ, I would love to talk more about internal events, but we did get a Q&A that's deeply tied to what we're talking about, the location-based communities. Usually we leave a few minutes at the end for Q&A. We might go over, so do we want to tackle this question first, PJ, before heading to the next part of our conversation?
Yeah, so
So yeah, for anyone watching that doesn't see the question, it's what did you do with individuals that live in areas that didn't meet the threshold of 20 people per community? Did you offer any substitution to these people as well?
So there's a couple of answers there. It's either they can join the one that's closest to them, which is obviously not as satisfying as joining one where you actually live, or they do have like the permission to create one for folks that they know in that area and start it organically as that, like that. It's not like, oh, if you don't have 20 people, you can't have a group. It's more so just like, that's just where we started.
Awesome. Thanks, PJ. Well, with that, would love to flip over to just like some of the interesting internal programs and events that you've all had. I know there's been so many based on our conversations, from like larger ones to more like smaller group-based ones, but all like super interesting. So yeah, what have been some of your favorites so far, PJ? Or like some that like stand out to you?
Yeah. Okay. So definitely last year, we had a really successful event for Juneteenth. It was the first year that we were observing it as a company paid holiday. And we knew that there needed to be a lot of education around that. It's not just like, you get a day off and enjoy, right? There's a lot of importance and education that comes along with it. So we invited someone from the academia world, and she led an incredibly engaging conversation with trivia and prizes and music and just so much important information. I personally learned a lot. And we had almost like 700 folks.
That's crazy.
Tap in. Yeah. It was really, really, really cool. And that just like stood out for sure. Some of the smaller ones that we've had definitely involve bringing in like therapists. So mental health is a really big topic, should be a big topic, and it continues to improve on how we handle it. And first time we brought her in was when the pandemic was at its height, right? To really understand like how to navigate that. Then we brought her back around election time, so pre-election and post-election, because there's so much uncertainty and high emotions in that time, regardless of where you lie in the political spectrum. And we wanted folks to see what tools they could lean into for that time. Another one that really stands out for me is, we call it Yelp Summer School. So for 2 years now, we've had like employees around the company that have a really cool, like good skill at something. So Excel, public speaking, making slides, written communication, like these things that depending on where you live in the organization and where you work, like you might not have as much exposure to. But it's definitely skills that you want to develop. So it was a really cool thing because the first year got so packed. Like we had upwards of 200 to 300 folks in each session, that the Excel one, for example, this past year needed 2 sessions. And it was like beginner and advanced. And it's just like out of the kindness of the hearts of so many employees that we have in the company, that they're like, yeah, I'll do a session on this. And they're really, really, really well attended. So definitely proud of those events. And then for sure, the other ones that like stick out to me emotionally have to do with having those tough conversations, and really checking in on your communities. Like this past late October, we had a Black Burst for the Black community, and Somos Yelp for the Latinx community. get together and have a conversation about colorism in Latin America. And like that is just, that's the type of stuff that you want to be able to create a culture for, that folks feel safe enough having those conversations. So yeah, those are some examples.
Those are incredible ideas. I guess like even from like the speakers to those leading the workshops, like how do you identify folks that are like great fits for Yelp, from like the professor to the therapist to even like encouraging employees within Yelp to take the lead?
Yeah, you have to, it's like a balance of having like a pulse in your organization, right? Like engaged folks, folks that have been either part of ERGs in the past or not. Also your network, right? Like with business owners, we are Yelp, we love small businesses. And really just not being scared to start that conversation. Like, hey, I noticed something in you, or hey, somebody told me that you are great at this. Can we talk about what this would look like in an event or in a fireside chat, or it's really about being passionate enough to meet the needs of your customers. And to me, that's my employees. That's all the employees. So it's like, if that's the driver, having the conversations with the people on like who can lead the conversation or who can be a part of it, that's often like the easiest part, because people at Yelp collectively are just really in it to continue our education and to continue having opportunities to engage and connect with one another.
Yeah, that is awesome. And with that, one of my last few questions for you is, I know we mentioned that Yelp is remote first. So just curious what your thoughts are, because you've been at Yelp for like almost 7 years, right? Like you've been probably in person first and now you all are remote first. What are your thoughts about it? And then later on, would love to hear like what is crucial in making it work.
Yeah. So my thoughts, if you would have asked me this like maybe 6 years ago, I would have been like, oh, I don't know that I could do that. I love it. I love it. I think the way that my personality has shifted in years personally, and also just like the flexibility that it provides, the trust that it provides, like, in our teams to be able to do something, do it well, and still have space for your life. Like that's just something that I feel very lucky to have been able to get at this point in my career. So I love it. What I will say is that it comes with a lot of responsibility, because you want to make sure that that feeling is equitable. You want to make sure that all the different types of lived experiences have that support, right? Whether it be parents, that have to juggle so many different things at home, whether it's, folks with disabilities, like, making sure that they feel supported in their own way. And there's so many, scenarios where we have to make sure that just because remote first sounds good and cool and fun, that we're doing the work to really support everyone that makes up our company. So I think to your other question of like, what are some crucial parts to that, is over communicating, like over communicating, like write everything down, like asynchronous work is something that I'm a fan of, but like an example that I wanted to give that's really tangible is like the majority, it hasn't been like a mandatory thing, but I have yet to not see it, is when you have it at the bottom of your signature, like, hey, we value and respect flexible work arrangements. Although I've sent this at a time that's convenient for me, please feel free to respond during your specific working hours. And something that small that you might think like, what difference is going to make? Like it's made a difference for me. Sometimes I get an email at like a time that I cannot answer it. And instead of feeling like I'm doing a bad job by not doing that, I know that was put there intentionally by that person, because we want to respect different work styles and different bandwidths. Time zones are huge, the more diverse that we get as a company. So I think over communication and writing things down so people don't feel like they're missing out is really important. But on the flip side, being able to have conversations like this, right? Like if you need to hop on a huddle or hop on a quick call, right? Like there could be burnout from that as well. We all know Zoom burnout and Zoom fatigue and all those things, but sometimes things are easier fixed when you speak as close to in person as possible. So really having the flexibility to pinpoint and the adaptability to pinpoint when you need to do what. So recording meetings is always a huge thing that we tell our people managers, as long as everyone's okay with it, right? Nobody should feel like they are missing out. And that's our goal, to make sure that we have those tools and systems in place for that.
And I know you mentioned PJ earlier. One of my last questions for you is, I know like Zoom burnout and just like Zoom fatigue is real, but being the position you are, like the culture carrier within Yelp, like how do you make sure that you're staying creative and excited? Because there are some days where you're just like, I don't want to lead this, but you have to like keep everyone excited.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Listen, I feel like it's one of those things where if we're gonna be a company, if we are a company that we're telling you these are the benefits we offer, this is the way that you should be thinking about work, this is the advantages of remote first, like I should apply that to myself as well in order to be able to pour onto others. Like I can't, and this is something that's taken me a long time to learn, I can't just like go and never stop and never take a beat, because that same thing that's driving me, that I am passionate about, will crumble right in front of me, because I'm not like limitless in energy. I'm not limitless I'm gonna need rest. I'm gonna need recharge. And the sooner that you recognize that, and the sooner that you become okay with that, the sooner you can continue giving to that exact thing that makes you so passionate and so happy. Yeah, before I would be like, well, I'm passionate about it, I can never stop. And that's just not sustainable. But on the flip side, it does bring you joy, right? So it's just really managing and listening to your body, listening to your boundaries. Boundaries has been a very big topic for my personal and professional life in 2022. And I think it's really been helpful to really know what line to set to continue the quality of my work and continue building equitable spaces for all the people that I care about without losing myself.
Yeah, exactly. I know people within your teams and your positions are one of the most empathetic people within companies. So it's like hard. So it's great to hear that you're like setting boundaries and being
Yeah.
able to sustain your pace right now.
Yeah, and leaning into those people too, because
Yeah.
oftentimes like our teams are small,
Yes.
and like we might all be feeling it at the same time, and that's okay, but also talking about it, right? Like sometimes it's hard to ask for help. But that's a type of boundary, if you think about it, that you put on yourself, like, oh, I'm not gonna ask for help. Like, no, like open that up and really be honest with yourself to the point that you're comfortable with, and reach out your hand, because to your point, people in this work are really empathetic and really all have this similar goal to make others happy and to make others thrive in the spaces that they're in. So not being as scared to be honest about where you're at is also really big.
Well, PJ, that wraps up most of my questions for today. Everyone here, thank you for joining us. If you have questions, feel free to drop it in the chat as we wrap up. But with that, PJ, are there any parting words or final thoughts that you want to leave with the group today?
We're not alone, y'all. Jade is doing such a great job at putting all these things together and creating community for those who love to create community. So if there's anything I can do, or any chat that I can have, or anything I can learn, like, please, let's lean on one another, because we all want to make our workspaces better for everybody. So yeah, that's just encourage everybody to stick together and reach out.
And how can people contact you best, PJ?
Oh, my email is pjc@yelp. I can put it in the chat.
Oh no, all good. We will share that around. But if you prefer email, LinkedIn.
Oh, email or LinkedIn is perfect. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Well, with that, everyone, we can wrap up. I'm going to quickly share my screen for our final closing thoughts. And then we will also be sharing notes and everything with everyone as well. So let me just quickly. Okay. So to wrap up, thank you again, PJ, for joining us. Again, everyone can find PJ on email or on LinkedIn. And thank you again for joining us. We're Epoch. If you ever want to talk more about employee experience, workplace experience, you know where to find us. And if you know anyone that you would want to recommend for us to spotlight and share their learnings with, please let us know. But with that, PJ, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jay. This is awesome. Anything else that I can do, let me know. You're
Amazing.
also
Well,
doing great.
everyone, thank you so much. Everyone, take care of yourselves during this holiday season, and we'll chat more soon.
Bye.
Bye, all.